Wagonga Inlet curves around behind the town of Narooma, and this southern arm is called Foster's Bay. Now, dotted around the shores of Foster's Bay are little jetties with boat sheds. There's a slipway with a large boat on it, you can see behind me there. There are little seafood restaurants, and up the end there's a marina. Now, one of the remarkable things about this area is the fact that the water is so clear that even though it's 30 feet deep at the end of these jetties, you can still quite clearly see the bottom. And at any time you can see an octopus, you can see several sizes of stingrays, you can see a huge variety of various species of fish of all sizes up to quite large sizes, and squid swim by of a night time into the pools of light that are thrown by the lights on the jetties there. Now, the kids love to fish here. They have a marvellous time. They can actually see the fish taking their bait, and also even the local dogs have fun chasing the small fish around in the shallows. One of the inhabitants of Foster's Bay is the Wagonga Princess, owned by Charlie Bettini. It's been in his family for a long time. Charlie's the owner skipper, and he takes excursions around Wagonga Inlet to show people what it looks like. Now, she's a beautiful old boat. Charlie's a very interesting guy. Let's let him tell the story.
Well, welcome aboard the Wagonga Princess, ladies and gents. My name's Charlie, and I'm a third generation Naroomarite. My dad was an oyster farmer here, as was his dad. And my dad was probably one of the best fishermen the river's ever seen. I'll be telling you a few fish stories as we go around. I have got photos to prove some of them, but the rest you'll just have to believe me. Now, the Wagonga Princess, she was built in 1905, and she was originally built for the Kalimna guest house at Lake's Entrance, called the Kalimna. At one stage she was on the Eildon Weir. In the late 60s she was on the Upper Yarra and was called the Tom Thumb. Before she was brought to Narooma about 12 years ago, she was called the Paynesville Princess. She's all made of Huon pine. Originally had a steam engine in it. What she has now is a 20 horsepower Chinese diesel. 20 draft horses, not ponies. She does 10.7 knots flat out. Now, a little bit about Narooma. Narooma's only a fairly young town compared with the rest of the towns on the coast here. The original township was called Wagonga, and that'll be where we'll be turning around today, at the head of the river. And Narooma was actually called Wagonga Heads. Now, the reason that the township was located at the head of the river, in the old days they didn't have a vehicle ferry or a bridge across the river. The main highway from Sydney to Melbourne went around the back of the river. Now, Narooma is not really its proper name. It's really Narooma, N-O-O-R-O-O-M-A. When they established the post office here, the postmaster wrote it down as N-A-R-O-O-M-A, and that's how it stayed. And what it means in Aboriginal is clear blue waters. And I'm sure if you drive across the bridge there on a nice day like this and look at the water, you can see why it's called that. Now, this is called Paradise Point on our starboard or right hand side here. You notice the oyster farm signs down there. That's private oyster lease to the right hand side of that. The next half a kilometre up the foreshore here is public oyster lease. And you can quite legally go there and eat as many oysters as you like. There is a rule. The rule is you must not take them home with you. You have to eat them there. Now, this, as we come up on our starboard or right hand side here, is probably the only place on the inlet where the rainforest actually comes down to high tide mark. It's called Paradise Point. It's been a very popular picnic spot over the years. As I was saying, this is the only part of the river where the rainforest actually comes down to high tide mark in here, and absolutely magnificent in there. If you look carefully, you'll see it down the foreshore, a broad-leaf plant. Now, that's a typical rainforest tree, and what that is a stinging tree. You get stung by that tree, the sting can last up to three weeks. Now, as a kid I used to come up here with my dad oyster farming. He'd drop us off in here. I call it real Tarzan country in there. A lot of vines. We used to swing around the vines. And the funny thing, I had two aunties with me up here a couple of months ago. One of them hadn't been up the inlet here for 52 years. And she was telling me when they were kids, they used to play in there on the vines also. I showed you before an old flat-bottom paddle wheel steamer that used to come up here and collect logs for the timber mill in the old days. Now, they used to have to leave down the town there about 5 o'clock every morning. Now, the boss of that mill was a fairly strict and hard boss. If you did one thing wrong, it was don't come Monday, instant dismissal. My dad was coming up here about 6 o'clock one morning oyster farming. And here's the old paddle wheeler, high and dry in that point over there. And he pulled up, and his mate happened to be driving it this day, and he said, "What's happened, Jeff?" And Jeff said, "I'm going to get the sack. I'm in trouble for this." My dad said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Oh, I had a big night out last night. A very big night out." And he said, "I went to sleep coming up here this morning, and it drove itself up on the bank." He said, "I'm going to get the sack for sure." My dad said, "Well, let's have a think about this." It had two big rudders on the back, held in by two pins. My dad pulled one of the pins out, threw it out in the middle of the river, kicked the rudder and fell off. He said, "There you go, Jeff, you've lost your steering." He never lost his job. That's a true story, by the way.